me tell you a little bit about our visiting writer. Jane Wong is the author of the 2023 debut memoir, and if you recognize the title, that would be Bruce Springsteen's song, right? Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City. She's also the author of 2 books of poetry, the first one called Overpour, and the other one, I do love the name of this, How to Not Be Afraid of Everything. Her poems can be found in places such as Best American Non-Required Reading, the New York Times, American Poetry Review, and too many others to list. As well, her essays have appeared in places like McSweeney's, the Georgia Review, and too many others to list. She's also a visual artist and was the recipient of a Washington Artist Award. Her first solo art show was called After Preparing the Altar, the Ghosts Feast Feverishly, which was exhibited at the Frye Art Museum. And her performance and installation work has also been exhibited at the Richmond Art Gallery and Asian Art Museum. Her memoir was named a Best Book of Spring by Bustle Magazine, a Best Book of May by Good Morning America, Ms. Magazine, Pure Wow, Volume 1 Brooklyn, and Chicago Review of Books. And the Rumpus and Miss Magazine both said it was one of the most anticipated books of 2023. Jane lives in Seattle, but grew up in a Chinese-American restaurant on the Jersey Shore. So, of course, considering that and the fact that her brother graduated from Brookdale, and her mom took a couple of classes here as well, I, of course, could not resist inviting her to read. What I particularly appreciate about Jane's work is its lyric sensibility. The memoir has a clarity and exactness of detail that makes it come vividly alive. Take, for example, a ping pong table described as a bright green bully in the corner, or a description of her mother's hands, quote, curled around a credit card like a squirrel's around a nut. From the very start, Jane recreates what is such an ephemeral thing, memory, but with a startling exactness that makes it seem to be occurring right now, in the moment, as you read. Like in the opening passage, quote, in the murky broth of yet another heartache, my mother cuts me slices of dragon fruit. I'm home in Jersey, slumped at the kitchen table. My hair is dip-dyed in snot, tears, and hot mascara. Isn't that great? This is language that is so energized, and energized with the effects clearly of a poet's heightened sense for sound. Her book is not only about the story she is telling, though the place, time, and people are powerfully evoked. In her work, it seems to me that every single word, all 253 pages of them, matter to her, and the memoir shimmers in its sentences, as much as it explores important questions such as, quote, what can language do? What can art do? Or the question her mother asks her, which Jane answers by saying it is the simplest and hardest question, quote, what makes you happy? I know that reading Jane's work has made me happy. It also makes me think, it inspires me in its beauty, and it makes me hope there's another book really, really soon. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Jane Wong.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me all right? Suzanne, that was such a stunning introduction. I felt like you were actually writing a poem. I was just like, what's happening to me right now? I have a lot of feelings right now because I'm kind of like having a hometown reading. We just live 10 minutes away, so easiest commute to a reading I've ever done. Love it, love it. I'm so excited to be here at Brookdale, truly. As Suzanne mentioned, my brother graduated from Brookdale. My mom has taken classes here. I've been on this campus many, many moons ago, but it's really special to be back here and to read in my like hometown. Like what? Here I am, however many years later. I'm just really grateful. And also for the incredible conversation I just had during dinner. Thank you to all the wonderful faculty and students that I just shared some really deep thoughts with over really pretty delicious Brussels sprouts. So thank you all so much. I'm actually a tiptoe reader. This is very awkward. So I'm gonna actually just I know it's very weird. One time actually, when I read on tiptoe, one time I fell over. So I'm really actually glad that I have this music stand here. Don't ask me why I read on tiptoe. It just is a thing. But I have thought to myself, my mom's taking way too many pictures. This deeply embarrassing. Oh my gosh. But I thought tonight I would actually begin by reading some poems to start us off, almost like a little appetizer. And then just dive into reading a bit from the memoir. See, now the sound of her phone taking photos. I guess mom's got a mom, and I can't avoid that. And then I'll hopefully have some lovely conversation with you all if there's time for questions and answers too. Just thank you all so much for being here. And yeah, there are cookies. Like, what better can you ask for? So grateful. Okay, I'm gonna start by reading a poem that sometimes I forget that I wrote something. It's been many, many years. Sometimes certain poems don't appear in books, which I think is actually quite special. So I always feel like there's these little poem islands that just float off that I write and I forget that they exist. So I'm going to read one of those. And since we were talking a little bit earlier during dinner about alternate endings or how you wish a scene had gone, I thought this would be appropriate. This poem is called 10 Alternate Endings. 1. The flattened roadkill squirrel puffs back to life. 2. My father never leaves our family, and I sprout more ventricles in my heart. 3. I love so richly, I spare millions of pennies in my trust. 4. Rose hips bloom in January, pink jellyfish in shattering snow. 5. My heart becomes a jar of wildflower honey and does not amber. 6. Everyone is so well fed, they cry greasy tears. 7. I sit on a balcony in a large city no one has ever heard of, watching the one I love come back to me like rewinding a tape I've played many times before. 8. The dead ends of my hair split to form their own continents. 9. My mother reaches the end of her patience and heaves my father's cigarette-stained armchair out the window, and some college students catch it from below, grateful. 10. I lift the end of the day up like a fat centipede with its legs kicking and say, look how much you have. Thank you. I think I'm going to read one poem from How to Not Be Afraid of Everything, which, by the way, I offer no actual advice. I just want you to know that this book does not solve that problem. But what I will say is that as I was writing this book, I really wrestled with the things that I am afraid of. And by the end of it, at least when I was writing, I came to realize that the things that you're afraid of, the things that you're angry about, that you feel rage about, that desire for peace and for, that peace within yourself, but peace all around you, can only be done in community. So I don't know, even though I did not solve fear, it helped to write about it, I guess. I want to read the first poem mostly because I really love playing with form, and this poem is called Mad. And Mad Libs, where you basically fill in the blank. I wanted to start this book kind of off with anger and rage, especially as someone who's a Chinese American woman. I think so often people just assume I'm going to be quiet and nice and not get angry. And I'm like, you know what? No, I am angry. There's a lot to be angry about, right? So this is written in the form of Mad Libs, but it's also about being mad. So there's a doubleness there. I'm going to basically pause when you hear the blank space. You'll hear it being kind of unfilled. Mad. Jane, deceived by time and again should not, but she and slept with curled fists. The rat catching a ride on the turtle winds, ugly and coarse, but beware of strangers who, and win your, and lick the sweat off your nose and false, just to taste their own. Do not trust in owls and heads that spin. Heads should not spin nor stink like ammonia in the armpits like a habit of. Do not pause to watch insects like dangling lights. Their soft speckled bodies and minutiae of buzzing dandelion seeds have already you in the neck. Blood on their spindle tongues. This is a metaphor for. There are no wolves in this tale, only handsome, with pea green eyes will tell you you are as soft as. Then they will carefully cut and seek only the smallest kindness of shaking out a pebble from a neighbor's shoe to do unto others what you. Did you swallow? Jane, called intense, surely head spun, owl struck, stating if only she. Called feisty, talks to, often too smart for. Good, I never thought you'd be looking like. You have big eyes for a curiously strong or weak, or it's just, and it's for the best. Her hair, though, is the best and is remarkably like kindling and okay for to touch, light, ingest, and flame strands by. Ignore when she says, or this is of Jane. Jane rubs salt all over her body to become a dissolving, and thusly, rightfully so, right out of this world. Thank you for listening to that. Okay, I am going to pivot out of rage and Mad Libs and stuff like that into this memoir, which is kind of a little terrifying to be out in the world because it is kind of the truth, right? It's very vulnerable to share with people the things that have happened to you in your life. I have always been obsessed with, poetry and lyrical language and visceral language. But so the hardest thing for me when I was writing this book was actually to sit with my feelings and actually try to express like what was going through my heart and my mind during this time. So it was a challenge. It definitely took 7 years. I'm just grateful that like I'm able to share a piece of this memoir with you all, especially in my home state. And if there's any Bruce Springsteen fans out there, yes, of course, this is from Atlantic City in Nebraska. And I think it's always so fun. I just so badly want Bruce Springsteen to read this book. I have no idea how to get to him. If anyone has a personal connection. Wait, what?
I work with his archivist.
You work with his archivist?
And he presented here before he had any albums out.
Really, Carl?
In 1971. I was the faculty advisor. I almost got arrested.
Wow. Okay, here you have it. Here you have it. If there's any way, other than me throwing the book on stage awkwardly and probably getting arrested myself, if there's any way to get this book in his hands, it would like be a dream come true. Oh my God. Okay, this is happening. Okay, all right. I really was almost close to being like, should I just like take it to a show and just like, but then like, you know how people have been like throwing things on stage and it's this whole thing. So I was like, no, don't do that, Jane. Don't do that. Don't be that person. But yes, maybe we'll chat. Yay. And if I'm almost getting arrested, I don't know, Carl, like that seems pretty epic. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna read a bit from the memoir, which is always, again, kind of nerve-wracking to me, but here we are, and we're here together. I'm going to actually read something that is kind kind of referencing someplace incredibly local, which is my restaurant that I grew up in. I grew up in a Chinese American takeout restaurant right at the Shrewsbury Plaza. So if you kind of know where, do you all know where that is? I see some nods. It was that Chinese restaurant that's right at that corner. Do you all know what restaurant that is? It's like, what's the don't know the new name, but there's a big Italian supermarket right next to it now, which is so good. I can like eat free samples of mozzarella for hours. Yes, but that's my restaurant. So I've never been able to share that with like, for you all know where it is. No one has ever seen it, you know? But that's where I grew up. I grew up in that restaurant in that strip mall. My mom dropped me off at the public library. Monmouth County Eastern Branch is semi-close, and she dropped me off there for 6-7 hours, free babysitting, pretty much. So this piece that I'm going to read tonight is called A Cheat Sheet for Restaurant Babies. Anyone here grow up in a family business or have worked in a family business? A few folks, yeah, you know you're doing it for free, right? Sometimes, yeah. I think I understand. This is written as a cheat sheet. And so it's written to the younger version of myself. There's always a new kid at that restaurant. So this is written for the kid after we sold the restaurant, after my father gambled the money away that led to the fall of the restaurant. It's for the new family that moved in. This is to that little girl. I'm writing to her as a cheat sheet. Okay. A cheat sheet for restaurant babies. How to lob an egg into a parking lot. Wait until it's dark. Settled in dark, not sunset dark, say 9 p.m. The sound of breaking is better when you can't see it happening. When your father isn't looking, go to the fridge and steal 2 eggs from the bottom of the carton and wrap them up in a small towel, folding the towel like you would an origami cup. Sneak out through the back of the restaurant, mind the potholes, and circle around front to the parking lot. Unfold the towel and give your little brother 1 egg. When he says the egg is too cold and it smells rotten like unbrushed teeth, tell him to shut up. Ground your heels into the gravel as you imagine baseball pitchers do to gain traction. Give all your anger up to the egg. Breathe your hot breath on it. Hold it up to the sky like an offering, a sacrifice, this careful thing that could have grown into something else. Tell your brother there's nothing to be afraid of. Tell him to stop shaking. He is no incubator. With your arm bent back at 45 degrees, hurl the egg high into the air, into an arch any city would welcome as a bridge. Hurl the egg, and do not think about anything, not about how your father sloshes an aquarium of whiskey, not about the growing piles of bills you'll have to translate later. You must give the egg all of it. You can open or close your eyes, it won't matter, since you won't see the egg land, but you'll hear it. You will hear your brother squeal like a pig at mealtime, and you will hear the splat, the crepuscular glob of the yolk spreading across the hood of a car. Poor car, you'll think. Poor, stupid car. How to lock your brother in the meat freezer. Say the following with love and intention. You won't even last 5 minutes. It's 100 degrees outside. Mommy said you have to go get the spare ribs. Look, I could see my breath in here. I'll give you $5. Let's go to Alaska. You aren't afraid, are you? How to be in Alaska. You live on the other coast, the Jersey side, and the wildest thing you've ever seen was a goose eating potato chips at the beach. But in the leeching cold of winter and super sad February, you can escape anywhere. You can be transported to the opposite side of the country. To travel, you have to wait until closing time around 11 p.m. when the parking lot empties and your mother starts shaking ants out of the MSG bin. The ants scatter from their salt haven slowly, begrudgingly, like teenagers when the mall shuts down its lights. Pull on your boots and grab 2 brooms from the supply closet and run outside. Ask your little brother where he'd like to go, and he'll say Alaska. his arms high in the air as if a puffin would adopt him any second. Earlier, at extra lonely 5 a.m., before you woke up, a snowplow's jaw pushed all the snow from the parking lot up against the street lamps. Take your little brother's arm and give him a broom, bristle side up. Don't ruin this expedition, you'll say, or I'll have to send you back to Jersey. As if Jersey was some sort of punishment. With the alien light and the Alaskan sun, dig the end of the broom into the hard snow, a mix of ice, gravel, and car oil. Climb up the mound and declare coordinates all along the way. At the top, sit with your little brother, your back against a street lamp, the bare warmth of electricity running through this conduit, this lifeline. Close your eyes, frost thickening along your lashes, and imagine what it feels like to be so far away from home, to leave this parking lot, this strip mall, this state, this way of life, and imagine traveling to places beyond Alaska, Hong Kong, Seoul, St. Petersburg. Vow to leave Jersey the instant you graduate high school. Link your 2 pinky fingers together and promise yourself you'll leave. And as you fall asleep, surrounded by glaciers and your mother's sharp voice slicing through the ice, your brother declares everything he wants to see. Yak, mud, ice, caribou, polar bear, volcano, ants, ants, ants. How to carry dishes. Carry a pile of dirty dishes with both hands to start. You don't learn to shoot a basketball with one hand first, do you? Then after a few weeks, carry the dishes in the crook of one arm like you carry your textbooks. When you feel bold, stack crushed soda cans on top of the dishes. Put one foot in front of the other. This rule of thumb can be applied to dancing with boys, which unfortunately won't be relevant to you during middle school or high school or ever, for that matter. Don't forget that you quit dance club after a day, and when you naturally bump into the prep table and drop a dish, its porcelain centers splintering in all directions like the sun's rays, do not listen when your mother laughs at you and says, "And who would marry you?" Instead, keep putting one foot in front of the other until you reach the kitchen sink, a wide, deep crater. Lay down the dishes, the refuse of others, the barely chewed pieces of beef fat and gnarled stems of broccoli. Raise your outrage. Who is rich enough to leave all this food behind? Wash the oyster sauce trickling down your arm like squid ink. Add these customers to your revenge list for making your family cook Chinese American food, sticky sweet food your family had to learn to make. This is not your mother's family's dishes. Don't pretend to know what duck sauce is. No one knows. It's true. What is it? Never eat this fake plastic food, the photos of which are oversaturated and laminated over the ordering counter. Wait for the real Toy Sunny's food that your mother makes during 20-minute lunch and dinner breaks. During dinner, help your mother carry your favorite dish, whole tomatoes, eggs, rice, ginger, soy sauce, and sesame oil. When your mother was pregnant with you, she grew tomatoes all around the small duplex in Manawan that your 4 uncles, Nging Nging and Yeah Yeah, lived in. Think about your mother at 21 years old, sitting on a mattress in the duplex's attic, squirrels running along the beams. Imagine their feathered duster tails tickling her feet. Imagine her eating a tomato like an apple, the juice trickling down to her knees. Think of the bright green vines wrapped around you as you eat your favorite dish, the tomatoes as sweet and tart as your burgeoning heart. Forgive your mother for being so tough on you. You don't know what she'll have to carry over the years, the bills, the food on the table, the disappearance of your father, the work, yes, the work, and the overwork. Don't you forget. You can't forget. Just look at her hands, canvas rough and trembling, wanting to be held. How to write your revenge list. Start with the cruel ones. The neighborhood boys who threw rocks at you, had picked up flat rocks from their landscape yard and threw rocks at you and at your backpack as you walked home. Add the ones who ignore you, the ones who look at clouds more than they look at you, the ones who placed you in lower level English despite the stack of novels you read every week. Add the untrustworthy ones, the ones who smile too wide and compliment your hair while pointing out your too large ears. Add those creepy white guys who always sit next to you on the bus, in the park, anywhere really, and ask if you're Chinese and if you can speak English. Imagine stabbing them like stabbing the foggy eye of a steamed fish. Add the popular girls, the rich kids, the customers who get frustrated and yell at your mother because they can't understand what she's saying, the kid who punched your little brother in the stomach, the racists, the fetishists, the politicians, the abusers. Add them, add them. Think about adding your father, who will leave very soon and will always somehow be leaving you. Think about how he gambled everything away and drank and smoked and lied and never spoke to you. How, when you were very little, he didn't pick you up from band practice, and you had to sit with your teacher for 4 hours until your mother came. How the reed of your clarinet grew moldy from your own mucilage. How he had decided to go to Atlantic City that day, and he kept going there like a moth drawn to light. Think about it, yes, think about it, and give it a thorough evaluation, but please don't add him to the list. In decade-long increments, when your mother tells you he called and asked about you, do not flinch in anger or grief or longing. Though you're a heathen, pray that he's still there, still alive, still able to blink and wonder from time to time, where is my daughter? Where is that girl? And what to do now that you're older and far away? There's not much to do now that the restaurant is long gone, and you'll find this idleness disconcerting, and you'll want to grab a broom to sweep or stomp or throw. You'll want to hiss for the sake of hissing. You'll want to chase raccoons just to find your likeness. The hours will grow shorter and the smells less pungent. Instead, you'll move to New York, to Hong Kong, to Iowa, to Montana, to Washington, to a place so full of moss it'll grow inside your apartment, the bearded green lining your windowsills. Call your brother, your mother, call them in apology as in, sorry it's been so long, and what did you eat today? Stop by your papa's apartment in the Central District in Seattle for lunch and devour her salted fish and wipe your greasy mouth with pocketed Alaska Airlines napkins. Marvel at how your brother has grown exponentially taller than you and how he stands like an evergreen tree, rooted, no longer shaking. Listen to your mother laugh like a bursting tomato, seeds spilling everywhere. Over a bowl of soup, forget and forgive your father. Let the daikon and the rice balls soften your aging face. When buying groceries, open an egg carton, check if anything's broken. Let the eggs feel heavy and round in your hands, and do not calculate the physics of projectile motion. You are never good at science anyway. Instead, read and write in good light, in hovering white light, in egg light, in a bed you share with someone and then no one. Do not be afraid of loneliness. Remember your teenage self and what your mother told you right after your father left, the both of you struck by the sting of salty wind along the Jersey shore. She says, if I was allowed to choose, I would choose to be alone. Allow yourself to make your own decisions, become your own book, your own handholder, your own revenge in language struck with a good cleaver. Repeat the little toisanese you know to your grandparents in this world, in another world's wom sekong. When you return to the strip mall 20 years later, the restaurant will still be a restaurant, and there will be a small black-haired girl from another family, another restaurant baby life. Don't look her in the eye. Don't tell her who you are. Do not ask her to draw you a picture on a menu or how long it takes for her to devein shrimp or if she falls asleep behind the fronds of potted plants. Does she stick gum along the ribs of bamboo? Is she a rat, too? Don't ask her. It'll be too close, too rotten, too down to the bone honest to reach out and tell her everything you know. Thank you all so much. It's still so wild to me that some people know where that restaurant is. That's just, yeah. It feels like that restaurant, returning to it, we actually have never stepped inside of it. I think it would cause too many emotions. We just awkwardly stand outside looking. Like I am that creeper, you know, and I think about that. Like I've seen this other little girl there, and I've just stared at her, and she's probably like on her iPad just being like, who's this like weirdo? And I'm like, I was you. Anyhow, thank you so much. That means so much that you all listened to that very vulnerable piece. I think there's some time for some Q&A maybe. If people are like open to asking questions, I'd love to chat with you all. Hi. Oh, there's a mic coming your way. There is.
So I know you said in the dinner that you, your writing wasn't necessarily like therapy, but in my personal opinion, that piece you just read feels like you're not feels like you're healing your inner child.
Yeah.
So is that the intention? Because I feel like you were trying to like speaking to your younger self, trying to heal your younger child.
That's a beautiful question about the process of writing and healing and the discoveries you make when you write. I think I was trying to heal my younger self, and weirdly, by looking at this other girl that would have been me, kind of another perspective, like almost like a looking at my younger self as if I wasn't her, helped me a lot in doing that. I think the surprising thing about writing this memoir was that after the book was published, a lot of things happened to me that I would have never done if I didn't write this book. Firstly, the thing that really changed me when this book came out was that my mom and I had not returned to Atlantic City since I was a child. And my father went there to gamble all the time. And at the end of my book tour during the summer, this is June 2023, we were invited to do a reading in Atlantic City. My mom was also in conversation with me, so she was on stage. It was very funny and weird. But the organization put us up in a casino hotel. We hadn't been in a casino, again, since I was a child. And to tell you how emotional that was, like I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't write this book to go back. And my mom, who has never gambled, I have never gambled, she just was like, one night she was like, right after my reading, she was like, should we go gamble? And I was like, no, this is too traumatic, because my father was a gambler, and again, he's not in my life, and it changed the entire course of my life, his addiction to gambling. And we did it. We played the slots for $5, and we didn't know how to gamble. We just hit buttons that were lit up, and my mom was like, that's it? And I was like, that's it? And then we just went to get ice cream. And so I would have never, ever been able to return to Atlantic City, never would have ever been able to return to a casino and heal some wounds if I didn't write this book. And again, therapy is therapy. Writing is not, going to a licensed therapist. But I think there is something about writing that has, this kind of healing journey to it. So I'm very grateful that I even got the chance to, write a lot of these like feelings in this lifetime, truly. So thank you for that beautiful question about healing and writing too. And I was telling folks earlier too, that's like I hadn't read in my home state until this memoir kind of came out. And so I've been reading all over New Jersey, and it's been so amazing because I was like, oh my God, I'm here, I'm back home. I will say that, yes, I'm in Seattle, but I was telling my mom, like, since I've been visiting Jersey so much because I book tour, it's like, should I move back? Like, I'm not joking. We were talking about this. I'm thinking about it. So come back, yeah. Thank you for that question. I might, for real, yeah. Yes, a question here. I think a mic's coming to you too.
I just wanted to ask, during the dinner, you said that it was hard to put the truth out a little bit. And that you're always revising your work. Did you ever find moments where like you stopped writing and you were very hesitant on doing it because of how difficult it might have been?
Beautiful question about truth-telling and creative nonfiction, and times in which I had to pause and take a break and maybe not write a particular essay, or what it was like to do that, the process of writing. Absolutely. I think the hardest chapter in this book is called The Object of Love, and it's my personal favorite, and the one I'm the most proud of. That one took me 7 years to write because I wrote maybe 2 pages of it, got scared of what I was going to write about. I took a 3-year break from it, did not touch it, and I came back to it. Same thing happened. I wrote a few more pages, got scared of it, put it away. Another year passed, and then I would come back to it. And so I think for me, in any sort of writing, I feel like in art or the page, it should never hurt you. I think that for me, I don't want to re-traumatize myself, especially writing memoir about some difficult things. Instead, I want to be ready for it. And it took me a long time. It took me many years to be ready to write about something, about the truth. And I was careful to listen to myself because I think that if I kept writing when I did stop, something would have come out that I don't know would have been the actual truth. I don't know. I feel like I'm a big fan of like taking breaks from writing because it's kind of intense. I think sometimes I think of writing as like a bouillon cube, like all the flavor intensified in like one image or one sentence, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of salt. And so I really need to take breaks, and so I took a 3-year break from that really hard. At the time, it was an essay, but that's because the truth hurt. The truth hurt, and I had to really sit with that. So I encourage you all to really feel your like body and feel yourself in the act of writing, because you know best whether or not you're going to go there today or if you can go there tomorrow or the day after. It's always going to be there. The pages, it's not like it's going to be erased. It'll still be something you can come back to, but only when you're ready. And I think also what really helps too is that to return to it with like art and craft and beauty. I think that always helped me. When I was too angry to write a poem, I needed to actually step away and come back to that anger with beauty. Because as you can probably tell, I'm a Libra too. I love beautiful language. Like I just love the sound and sensory detail. And if I can make something, the ugly truth of something beautiful, then I feel proud of myself, you know? Then I am healing in that way. Wow, we are like going for some deep questions. Like, this is not like what is your favorite food, Jane? Okay, let's get real. Okay, I love it. Yes, there's another question here. These are great questions. Wow.
Hi. So I wanted to know your thought process behind you creating the alternate endings poem.
Oh, yeah.
It really struck my interest.
Oh, that's a great question too. About the alternate endings poem. I have always been obsessed with like alternate endings, and I know it's kind of like we see that a lot now in like movies, like Everything Everywhere All at Once and Past Lives, and there's so many other movies that think through alternate endings or the different paths your life could have taken. And that poem, I think, is from a long time ago. I want to say I wrote that poem 12 years ago, shockingly. Because again, it was one-off poem. It never showed up in a book. And for me, I am one of those, like, anyone else like a deep daydreamer? Okay, I feel like a lot of people are like, yes. Like, I just will just sit there and just be like, I'm off, like somewhere else. And I'm dreaming, like, what would happen if I dated this person instead of this person? Or like, what if I had done this instead of that? And so, like, alternate endings, or even in the book, I think about this in the memoir, and like the ways in which I wanted the scene to go, and it didn't go that way. And I've always been that daydreamer of like, almost like a future nostalgia. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but I have nostalgia for what things could have been. And that's a powerful feeling. And a lot of people feel this way, I think. And I think it helps to actually try to write it out, but in a way that's poetic. It's not like literal, like, oh, I wish I could reconcile with my father, right? That's a hope I have in life, but it may not ever happen, and it probably won't. So how do I reckon with what I want and what's the reality and what's in that liminal space between? I'm curious about that. The longing for something else to turn a certain way is more interesting. That's what I'm interested in. Why do we want a different ending? It's not about the different ending. It's about why we want it to end differently. That's a very deep question. Thank you. And I see some nods, so I feel like at least like you all are with me in that feeling of like, yeah, I think about these different lives. So that makes me feel good too. Like I'm not just like in my head. Yeah, beautiful question. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, there are questions?
Hi, I am also a visual artist.
Awesome.
And I'm kind of new to writing. So for me, I feel like writing is a lot more vulnerable and raw. When I'm making visual art, a lot of it is like a meditation for myself, and then it's really up to the audience's interpretation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't quite feel so like directly vulnerable. So I guess I have like a two-part question. Like, how do you bridge the gap between those two experiences as a creative person, and also how do you feel like your two practices inform each other?
That's a great question about different mediums and different types of art and how they speak to each other. Um, I, I have to do multiple mediums in order to satisfy, I think, different parts of myself and also to challenge different parts of myself. I think that I have been doing ceramics for a chunk of time now, maybe 3 years, and I'm kind of obsessed. And if I'm not writing, I'm at the ceramics studio. I've done installation art, and I've made paper, and I've done a lot of things. And I tend to go towards art, visual art, textural art, physical making, because I need to learn how to fail. That's for me. There's something about doing ceramics, if anyone's done pottery before, that you fail. Things blow up in the kiln. You just have to start all over again. And in writing, with revision, sometimes I'll over revise something to the point in which I can't even recognize the central spark in it. And so I need ceramics, I need that type of failure in order to help me write a certain way. And in many ways, you may be feeling that you may be hungry for that vulnerability in a different way, such as, writing obviously is a bit very vulnerable. You're the one who's creating the intention behind it. Whereas I think like in visual art, yes, it's true. It's a lot about how people interpret it. Same thing with writing to a certain degree, but there is a bit more rawness on the page. But I love it all. To be honest, I think about my visual work deeply tied to the fact that I don't like the idea that a poem or an essay or anything I write is over. I don't like the idea that things are final and over. That's just a general, my feeling is always like, there's so much more, it's gonna keep going. And so when I get a poem published and it's the final version, it's done, I get frustrated because I'm like, well, it could be something else. And so for instance, one of my poems in How to Not Be Afraid of Everything, I'm very pleased. I feel like it's what I want it to be on the page as a final version on the page. But I was like, no, I want to reimagine this poem. And so I cut out a bunch of words from the poem in rice paper sheets. And if anyone's ever used rice paper, to make spring rolls, they disintegrate, right? It's like, And so I folded my poem that I cut out in rice paper sheets in my mom's dumpling mix from like the restaurant days, right? And then I ate my poem. I cooked it and I ate it. And it felt so much better because the poem was about labor. It's called The Long Labors. That's the poem that I'm referencing. You can find it online too, The Long Labors. And the poem, The Long Labors, is really long. And it's about work. And it's about what it means to come from people who work. I have a cute little ring, and my mom was like, oh, let me see your ring. Let me try it out. It doesn't even fit on any of her fingers because she's got worker hands, right? And I have the privilege of having an education, and I think about that all the time, the unease of upward mobility and the fact that my mom physically labors. So that poem felt like physical labor. How could I write a poem without doing physical labor about labor? I had to cook. I had to fold dumplings. I had to do labor. I need to eat my poem. And I do this because I am learning more about how a poem never is finished. I always can retranslate it into another medium. And I highly recommend you all try these experiments out because what you can find by writing in different ways is kind of magical, Thank you for that question. Yeah.
Speaking of multimedia, have you ever thought of turning your poems into songs? Because if not, and you need help, then
Very cool. I am so not musical. I have a very probably deeply embarrassing video of myself somewhere. I did a reading once, I want to say Chicago, no, San Francisco, for something called Literoki, which was half karaoke, half poetry reading. And you get 1 minute of a karaoke song before you read. And it's like me trying to sing Casey and JoJo's All My Life for some reason, but the beginning of that song is like piano. And so I got away with just singing like a tiny bit. Anyway, it was deeply embarrassing, and I'm not musical at all. And I played clarinet, that very dorky instrument for me when I was growing up, and I still love it. I still play it. I still can play it. But yeah, it'd be so cool to translate something into a song, or even film or a video or something of that sort. Something more. Someone actually asked me, and I don't know how I feel about it. So you guys can all chime in on this, but I did get asked if I have someone who handles my film TV rights, and I was like, wait, what are you trying to say? And they're like, oh, like, be cool to kind of like have this be like a short film of this little girl. And I was like, no, makes me deeply uncomfortable that there's going to be someone that plays baby Jane. Like that's horrible to me. My first reaction was like, no, this shall never be like anything that would be on TV or a movie. It's terrifying to me. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just scared. Anyway, it's too late. I told them no. So, but if you all want to, I mean, I don't know if I should do it if I get another offer, but my guttural instinct is no. My mom's like, why not?
I'm just asking, like, if you want to collaborate, I can.
Oh, that's very
musical
sweet.
things and with you too.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate that. A few other questions. Yeah.
This is like something that happens to me every once in a while when I think back on like certain events and like I sort of reevaluate them like when I look back. So I want to ask, when you were writing your memoir, were there any like sensitive topics in your past that you had to like step back and reevaluate like in the current day?
Yeah, love all these deep questions. There were so many that it's even hard to pick which one I had to reevaluate in terms of that scene. But how I'll maybe answer this question that involves maybe like hearing the story from some other person's perspective too, is that there's this one essay or chapter in the book called To Love a Mosquito, and it's from my brother. And there's a really hard scene in which my brother goes to my father, again, we're estranged from him, to my father's house in Madawan at the time. And he goes over there with the VHS tapes of the NBA playoffs for the last 5 years. And he tries to go and watch the NBA with my dad. And I'm in the car. I'm supposed to just sit there, apparently, in the car because my brother was scared to go by himself, but he also didn't want me to come in. And to write that scene was really uncomfortable and really vulnerable. And I wanted to make sure I understood the scene correctly from his eyes, because I wrote the scene from my perspective in the car, being anxious to see whether or not my father would like answer the door. And my father does answer the door, but he kind of shuts the door in my brother's face and says like, I'm too busy. I'm not going to do that with you right now. And my brother's rage, like he's so upset, it's a hard scene to write. And so I had to talk to my brother to get his take on it. And he told me, actually, and I didn't know this, that he was, and my brother's a very, very, very tender-hearted, sweet, he doesn't have a lot of anger. He's a caretaker. He told me later that he was deeply afraid that he would have hurt my father. Like he wanted to punch my dad. Like he was rageful. And I didn't know that at the time. I just thought he was sad. So I had to talk to him to figure out how that scene would go. And there's a tiny moment when I wrote the scene in which I'd say that his hands are on the steering wheel to try to stop. So he's trying to stop himself from making them into fists. Like he's using it to clamp onto instead of going like this fully. And that's like a tiny hint of his rage, that he was afraid to be as rageful as my father. It's a subtle scene, but like my mind's like, I think he was very afraid of becoming my dad in that moment. And he told me that later. I don't even know if my mom knows this part, actually. She might be, I'm probably revealing things about my brother right now. But that's what's really hard too, writing about family stuff, Sometimes people know things, sometimes people don't. I hope that answers your question, but it does make me reevaluate that moment. and who to have compassion for. Would have loved to see that scene from my father's eyes, or hear what my father was thinking at the time, but I can't ask him. So yeah, that's a beautiful question. I will tell you that my brother's a gamer, and I heard that there was like a amazing recently like a gaming event here, which is really cool. And my brother, who didn't really read my book, but he read that one chapter because it's specifically for him. And the publisher, the literary journal that published that essay first, asked me to do some blog content or like share how to share this essay and share with more people. And she said, "What if you had your brother read the passage, and like we'll upload it to YouTube?" Which is deeply like, like that's awkward. But he did it. My brother did, but he did it in his gaming, like, situation. He had like the headset on. He was like, "Let's begin." And I was like, "What?" Anyway, it was kind of adorable and sweet, and like, that like. Anyway, I love him. I miss him. I wish he could have been here tonight. I know he's working a lot, but anyhow, and he went to Brookdale. So anyway, shout out to my brother. Thank you for that question. Wow, these are so layered and deep. I appreciate it. Oh, I think I saw. Okay, go ahead.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, sorry.
I'm curious for the memoir how you went about, like, what research was involved and how you went about approaching it, because it's a very different form of writing.
I love that question about research, mostly because in creative nonfiction, there's almost like two levels of research. The first of which, like personal family research, familial research, which I'll be honest is probably the hardest because you've got to interview your family without them knowing it's an interview. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because if you actually say to your family, "I'm interviewing you," guess what they're going to say? Nothing. They would never share a single thing. And I tried this when I would ask my mom questions. She's like, "Yeah, it was a hard time." That's it. That's all you got. And so you kind of have to ask the questions that, like, for instance, if I was going to ask about my mom, like growing up in rural China and not having really food to eat, because she grew up after, the Great Leap Forward, which, was a massive starvation. And she grew up with scarcity and with hunger. Instead, I would just ask her, what was your favorite food when you were little? That's when I got the answers I wanted to, because she shared with me then, she'd be like, "Oh, I got an egg on my birthday once, and it was so great." Like that says a lot, right? That she got a birthday gift of an egg, and that she clearly did not have the opportunity to eat much protein otherwise. And so that's one type of research, that asking the right questions, asking the questions that don't go at the question directly, indirect questions. Second is the research that I did for the book. I was a sociology minor, so I was like totally into creative writing, loved English, literature, but I also loved sociology. I loved figuring out why do people do the things they do, psychology as well, and what are the social systems in which allows for that to happen or not happen. And so I did a lot of research in this book to figure out, is this just my story, or is this a story of like more than just me, like large communities? And what I found out, especially in the title chapter, Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, is that Asian Americans have the largest, highest gambling rate, addiction rate of anyone in the country. And I thought to myself, they do pick up passengers in Chinatown, right, to go to the casino. And so it's like I had to do a lot of research to figure out, why is that the case, right? Like, are we targeted, right, to have like access to those gambling places? And so I did a lot of research. Same thing with Root Canal Street, which is an essay about my mom going to the illegal Chinese dentist in Chinatown. I realized that this is not just my family's story, but so many people in the U.S. Struggle with paying for healthcare, and that to go to unlicensed like doctors and dentists is a common practice amongst a lot of low-income folks. And so I did all that research too. It just helped me know I wasn't alone. Like, this wasn't just my experience, but like a larger communities. And so there was like two types of research. I found the researching like articles and archives and all of that stuff like helpful because it made me realize that it's not always just the personal. It's actually something quite communal. But the personal research, that was hard. And you got to do it. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like you always have to like double check your memory of something because you can't. I don't know. My one last funny story about that was that my brother. This is back in the day of Facebook, but which is still a thing, I think. But my brother, my name is Jane Wong. My mother's name is Jane Wong. Changed her name back to her maiden name. My brother's Stephen Wong. And once on Facebook, he changed his name to Stephen J. Wong. And I thought he added a J. We have no middle name. My brother and I, we don't have middle names. I thought he added a J because he wanted to be a J, like a Jane and a Jin. And I wrote that passage in my book being like, oh, it's always been me, my brother, my mom. He just wants to be a J. And my brother comes to me and he's like, I don't want to be a J. I just added it because like, it's like not cool to not have a middle name. I just wanted a middle name and I just like, my friends just made up that one. It's like, that's not cool. That's not cool for my story. Like, that's not helpful. It's more pretty if you just say that you wanted to be closer to us. And he was like, no, I didn't want to be closer to you. I was like, what? Anyway, it was J-A-Y. Like, he put that Stephen J-A-Y Wong. Anyway, so yeah. Sometimes you got to double check, and then I had to change it. This is great. Yes. Yay. Yay, thank you.